everybody! My purpose in these lessons is to focus on some aspects of literature development, for example, aspects which are often asked during exams, or anyway, which are extremely important to understand the development of literature and sometimes of history, but many times they aren't explained in details. So now we try to focus on the most important points. Today I'm going to speak about the rise of the novel. Obviously, the rise of the novel is extremely connected to English history and what happened in England in that specific period of time. Which period of time? We are talking about the 18th century, or anyway the period between the 17th and the 18th century. Those who know something about history, about English history, know that this period was extremely influenced by the so-called Stuart Era, which was between 1603 and 1714. During this period we have a very important development through Petition of Rights, through English Revolution, through the Commonwealth that Oliver Cromwell organized in England between 1649 and 1660. We know that this system collapsed because of his desire to be the Lord Protector, so to be a sovereign of this new institution that was anything but a real republic. And so we know also that monarchy was restored then with Charles II and James II, but finally we arrived to the Glorious Revolution, also called Bloodless Revolution, so revolution without violence. That revolution without violence led the new sovereigns, and I'm talking about Mary II, but also I'm talking about William of Orange, William III, coming from Holland, to create and to give England the very important Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was the first step to give more importance to the Parliament, and it was also the first step towards the creation of the United Kingdom. In this period we have a strong, we can say a strong industrial revolution, or anyway the beginning of an important industrial and social revolution. The new social class is the middle class. So the nobles are now in decay, and the new values are the values of the middle class, which are absolutely based on work, on economy, on social development, and this is exactly what the novel is about. Okay, so pay attention. We have to distinguish the concept of novel from the concept of romance. Okay, the romance was something extremely connected to fantasy, and it reminds us of all the heroic tales. The romance was in fact connected to all those chivalry tales we're talking about, for example King Arthur in England, and they are all heroic tales connected to poetry, in which characters were most of the times chivalric figures, heroes, knights, or some fantasy figures. So we can say that as for the identity of the character, we can say in general that they were noblemen, talking about good people, or eventually there were monsters, or anyway fantastic bad figures concerning evil, the evil side, but they had certainly no identity. What do I mean for identity? In the novel, characters have got a name, and a surname for the very first time. So they have got their identity, a name and a surname. This is very, very important. This is a true name. It isn't something that comes from virtues or values, some way they are called in history because of legends. They are real names. Real names connected with real places, connected to the places they were born, connected to the periods they were born in. So we can also say that time and place are identified and extremely specified. Why, on the other side, time and place during the romance is absolutely generic and it's far, far away, once upon a time. So this is extremely far away and it's not specified, it's not identified. Sometimes it's so distant that it even belongs to another dimension somehow, okay? While in the novel case, in this new genre, okay, places and times are so specified that sometimes, most of the times, or many times anyway, we tend to have diaries or epistles. Why diaries or epistles? Because in a diary we write exactly the date, the place and what we do, and so this is very, very scientific and it gives the idea, it gives the illusion of a sort of realism, of something true, even if it isn't, because they are fictional characters anyway. An example, one of the most important examples actually, Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe was written in 1719 and that date is considered the date of the birth, of the development, of the rise of the modern novel. Daniel Defoe wrote Robinson Crusoe pretending that he found this diary which told about these adventures of this incredible man who belonged to the middle classes. So back again, talking about identity, all these men belonged to, as I said before, to the noble environment. They were most of the time knights. While on this side, they belong always or almost always to the middle class. This is extremely important because they are the mirror of the rising class at the time in England and in Europe actually. So Robinson Crusoe, he belongs to the middle class. He was born in London, in England, and when he decides to travel, he doesn't want to do that because he wants to discover something or to go somewhere to fight for any ideas. He just wants to get to South America to control his plantations. Okay, so it was a very economical reason. This is very important. And after the shipwreck, he comes to this island. The island is desert, but it exists. It's not an island that Defoe invented somehow. It exists on the map. And Defoe could imagine, because of the climate and many other stuff, how the weather could be, how the plants could be, etc., etc. And what Robinson does on that island is very, very, we can say, symbolic, is typical of his social class, of the middle class. He wants to create a new society, a society in which he is at the head, okay, and the rest of society could also be made of pirates or cannibals. Doesn't really matter, because they follow the law of his society, and he manages to create profit, okay, using what he had. So we can count every single plant he grows there. And it is important that everything is recorded. Okay, it is much more important to know what and how much he manages to achieve than to talk about his feelings, after all. Okay, in fact, we know just in a few lines, a few pages, that he gets married eventually, okay, got also children, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is that he could plant stuff and develop his richness and everything. This is important because this is the middle class, the new values, work. This is what counts, okay? So it's a completely, a great change, okay? A shift. In fact, if we talk about the plot, we can say that in romance, the plot was a continuing, a never-ending battle, a fight, a battle in which were goodness against evil. Okay, goodness were the heroes, as we said before, noblemen, knights, etc. And the evil were these creatures, these monsters, or someone who didn't actually believe in the hierarchy of the time. The hierarchy now almost doesn't exist anymore because the middle class is fighting to destroy that hierarchy, to create a new hierarchy that isn't based on right of birth, on being noble or not, but it was based on work and richness. So also the battles change. In our case, in the romance, the battle is often for the king, so the authority, which basically the middle class is trying to destroy, or anyway, it has basically less power, obviously, aristocracy. Second, okay, they fight for the lady, for the woman, but actually the middle class couldn't care less. And third one, okay, the third one is for God. God, which is also the representation of goodness, it doesn't appear so much in the novel too. We can say that Robinson Crusoe could remind God only when he was extremely ill and he thought he was about to die, and so he read the Bible and had this sort of inspiration, but it lasted really a very short time. So basically we can say that religion belongs to the novel at all, actually. So our plot on the other side, as far as the novel is concerned, is all about social development. And most of the times we have to remember that, and we can remind also the picaresque novel, which developed in Spain. It is very similar to this idea of the social development, because this idea of this guy Picaro that was born, of course, in a poor condition, and he has to live some adventures. And sometimes he also commits little crimes, nothing so serious as far as morality is concerned, but at the end of the day he is able to find his social position and his social wellness. And so we can say that the novel in Britain is quite connected to the picaresque novel, and the picaresque novel will also inspire other novelists also much later, like for example during the Romanticism, and we are talking about Dickens, we are talking about Oliver Twist, which follows basically the same structure, doesn't it? So social development and economical development, and so we can also say profit, which is extremely important. Okay, it's extremely important. It's more important than moral. If we talk about Defoe, we can remember that Moll Flanders was defined, and please excuse my word, but that's the word that Defoe used. He defined her a whore. a whore, and a thief. So basically, we are quite far from the idea of the noble man or noble woman. This is something really, really different. Obviously, talking about the language, which language could they use in the novel and which language could they use in the romance? Obviously, in the romance, we used a very elegant language. Most of the times it was all about poetry. Most of the times it had to be very pleasant to hear, because it was something for the nobleman to enjoy, basically. On the other side, we have a very plain language, a very simple and plain language, very, very, very realistic, which is also somehow a sort of a document in the content, because we actually know how people lived, and also in the way of speaking, of talking, because in dialogues we actually find out the way they really talk to each other, more or less, obviously. Anyway, this is very important, because they talk about these people, but the author wrote also for those people. So it is extremely important to remember that now language, for example, and contents as well, were specifically meant to please a new public, a public of middle class readers. They had to be able to understand, first of all, and to enjoy what we read. So for the first time, literature was also a product, okay, for the market, to be sold, which is positive and negative together. Normally, as usual, it's quite normal that there are advantages and also disadvantages. Advantages because obviously now intellectuals and writers were free, were independent. They didn't have to depend on a nobleman who gave them a place to stay and money and something to eat, and they just had to talk about this great family and so on. On the other side, obviously, they are now submitted to the rules of the market, and now there is the debate, okay, about high or low literature begins. It has never ended. Now probably it's purposeless. It's not about a high or a low literature. It's more about the literature that people needed at the time, because I always say literature, arts in general, philosophy, sciences are a response to the needs of people, to the real needs of people. So it doesn't really matter if for example, Defoe had to write so many pages in a short time, and so there were also some mistakes there, and we can find them now. Okay, it doesn't make it bad literature or low literature. It's just the literature that was needed at the time, and it could be a mirror of the needs of that time. So this is what I wanted to tell you about novel and the difference between novel and romance. And then we will talk about other topics, and I hope that my video will be interesting for all of you. If you have any question, please subscribe my channel and ask question. I'll be glad to answer you directly, or eventually also I could be also ready to talk about the topics that you would really like me to develop. Thank you very much, and see you soon.